Tasmanians don't care as much as they used to.
No.
But the government can fix that. Like, I think Peter Gutman's doing a good job, and hopefully he stands firm, and the government can fix it. And the only Tasmanian football can't move forward without our own AFL team. Like, we just can't move forward. It's and it's disappointing that you'll always get a minority of people go, oh, we can't afford it, or it'll never happen, right? But that's fine. But it actually, Tasmanian footy can't get any better unless we're in the big league. So that's the only way forward. Now, Tasmanian footy will survive even if we're not in the. It survived for 150 years without us being in the AFL, and it'll still survive, but it won't move forward. It'll slowly but surely decay, but it will still survive the test of time because footy clubs are good. Like, you know, in my time, when I started at AFL Tasmania, we had no AFL games, and now we've got 8.
Now, were you part of that?
Yeah, it was part of that. Yeah, it was part of. So I was part of that first sort of task force. So Peter Hudson sort of really led the charge, right? But really, it became, you know, I remember Andrew Demetrio as the CEO of the AFL, and I remember I was the taxi driver. I drove. Basically, the deal was done with Hawthorn in a trip that I was driving, and Andrew Demetrio was pretty much on the phone for 2 hours organising AFL footy for Tasmania on the way from Hobart to Launceston, and you know, pretty much got the deal done, right? So Hawthorn were just going to play one game. And they made so much money in the first game, they pretty quickly played 2. And then St Kilda came in. And look, unfortunately, I think what's evolved, Hawthorn's been 20 years now. What Tasmania owes Hawthorn and North Melbourne is that we now know that we can actually have our own team, right?
Do we need to relocate a side? Is that rubbish, or it's only your opinion, so our opinions. So is that the way to go? Get a side over here, or start from scratch, get the best young kids, get the recruits that the Gold Coast get, and then start from there. If we had our own side.
Yeah, I think the best option for Tasmania is a team of our own. But you know, again, in my time, it was interesting that we had the plan. There was a point in time where the plan was North Melbourne was going to become our team, right? So North Melbourne was going to play 7 games in Tasmania, and then they were still going to be North Melbourne. They were still going to be at Arden Street, but the strategy was that if Tasmania had more members than North Melbourne, then you go to a vote and you relocate the team to Tasmania, right? So a bit like South Melbourne became the Sydney Swans, right? So that was the plan, but I think that horse has bolted. And so I think that a team of our own is the best option for Tasmania. If the AFL said you can't have a team of your own, but you can have a relocated team, well, we'd be mad not to say that.
Scott, I've got to ask. Glenn and I used to go to the Tassie Devils.
Yeah, we did. We loved it.
With 50 other people every fortnight, where it was.
What, us? Leo and I.
There was a lot of people there.
We was lucky enough to see Ian Callanan and young Gapins then and all those guys in Thurley and just coming through to their dream, didn't we?
And it was good. I enjoyed it. The VFL stopped, and I'm going to ask you the reason why, but I'm gathering it was because there just wasn't enough support behind it.
No, that's not the reason, really. I think, you know, we thought we did a lot of good things, but I think we the people involved in that whole Devils program, there are a lot of good people involved in it. The reality is we stuffed it up, I think, right? Now, and we stuffed it up because it became the Hobart Devils and not the Tasmanian Devils. So and we were chasing a premiership. That's what we were chasing. So it was a good learning experience, but it's actually, you got to think, it's not about the short term, it's about the long term. So it's not about the next, and when I say long term, I'm talking about the short term in footy really is a decade, because it just goes like that, right? So 10 years can just go like that, right? So we were thinking too short. We were thinking the next 2-3 years instead of thinking what's it going to look like in 20 years' time, right? So that's when the reference to the we stuffed it up. Now, what happened is that we lost the support of the North. I mentioned before about the North. So
Could I understand that? So is that because the games were played here and not up there?
Yeah. So what happened is the first few years in the Devils. I remember the first year because Tassie actually. We purchased games. We played more home games. We played more home games. I think we had, 11 or 12, 13 could have been home games in Tasmania. But we played, I think year one, we played 2 games on the northwest coast, 4 games in Launceston, and 4 games in Hobart. Right? It must have been 10 to start with. Right? So, and then it changed slightly, but we played in all 3 regions, and we stopped that. Right, we basically it become more about Hobart, and we become more about getting the good kids come down to Hobart, and more the cricket model.
Yeah, okay.
And we lost the support of the North, and then we partnered with North Melbourne, which by the way we were encouraged to by the government, because the government knew that there was the Hawthorn thing was going really well in North. St Kilda actually wanted to play in Hobart, not in Launceston, but politics took over, and Jim Bacon said no, all the games will be in Launceston. So what St Kilda wanted to do, St Kilda wanted Hawthorn to be the team in the north and St Kilda to be the team in the south.
Right.
That would have been a better outcome, right? Because we probably would have, the south would have partnered with St Kilda, I think, who would have been more engaged with the southern community than North Melbourne probably were. But anyway, North Ballarat and Tasmania did a 3-way deal together, so we were in this partnership arrangement because you couldn't actually win a premiership. So those players you mentioned, the Gapron brothers and Callan and Beams and Bartlett and Plapp and all these guys that were really good quality players for the Devils when it was a great program. The Devils was a great program, but the players wanted to win a premiership, and we wanted them to win a premiership, but. So that's the reference that I stuffed it up.
I hear on the radio all the time about how that rugby league, soccer, basketball, they're trying to get in because they know that AFL or Australian rules football in Tasmania is hurting. They're trying to get their claws in because they know they're hurting. Where did, at the top level, how do you look at that and say, we need to get this into schools, we need programs, we need to get this going again, state league, whatever it is it takes.
Yeah, I think. Look, I suppose I've been out of football administration for 5 years now, so you still take an interest, but it's good sort of time to reflect and just listen and learn. And I feel like I know sport as well as anyone in Tasmania, and there's no doubt. I think Tasmanians should stop looking at what happens in Victoria, and they actually should study more about what happens in South Australia and Western Australia, because Victoria was, we spoke a lot about the old VFL. The VFL, it was the best competition in the nation, had 12 teams, but South Australia and West Australia were really quite equivalent to Tasmania. So we were, the big 4 footy states were obviously Victoria, West Australia and South Australia. And West Australia and South Australian footy has grown and prospered on the back of 2 AFL clubs. Right? Survival of West Australian and South Australian footy has been their AFL clubs, right? And their AFL clubs invest back in the development of the game, right? So, like Hawthorn and North Melbourne don't invest back in the development of the game, but because they're not our teams, they're Hawthorn and North Melbourne, right? So, but that's the 2 teams in South Australia are Adelaide's teams, like South Australia's teams, and Adelaide's the best in my opinion, and Tim Lane I know is particularly passionate about this, but Adelaide is the best comparison because economically we're not far off half of South Australia, right? And they've got 2 teams and they're both surviving fine, right? But I loved my time at the AFL and I loved working with the AFL, but they don't care anymore. They don't actually care about Tasmania, so I'm not sure whether they ever cared, but they certainly don't care now. Jack Rowe wouldn't have gone to play at Richmond if we had our own team.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So he would have got drafted by the Tasmanian team, right? And so, and Grant Birchall and Jeremy Howe and all these people.
That's my argument, because we have had such good footballers.
Yes.
Yourself, we can go back, Peter Hudson.
We still
we
have.
can say young Reed. Well, of course we have.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is, that's the problem. They're taking the best of what we've got. I think the AFL
yeah.
give us enough money.
It's not about. It's
It's
not about money.
money. That was.
No.
See, a lot of people don't understand that.
It's just about a team,
Yeah.
right? So I remember the guy who's the CEO of GWS is a guy called David Matthews, and he used to be my boss basically at the AFL. So he's the guy at the AFL that I used to report to. 20 years ago, he asked me, what's the best thing the AFL could do for Tasmania? And I said, give us our own AFL team, and nothing's changed. Right? So in the end, it's the best thing that will happen. Will Tasmanian football ever not be part of this state? No, it'll always be part of this state. But again, I keep coming back to, we're talking about a lot of the great things that happened in the good old days. And Tasmanians don't care as much as they used to.
No.
But the government can fix that. Like, I think Peter Gutman's doing a good job, and hopefully he stands firm, and the government can fix it. And the only way he can fix it is we've got to somehow get our
Well, he's pushing it, which is good.
Well,
Good on
he is,
him.
And in Tasmania, when I say it's
think
not
that's
about money, right?
No, that's what I don't understand.
So when I say it's
Yeah.
not about money, Tasmania can afford an AFL team, but they're no different than Gold Coast and GWS.
Yeah.
But the difference in Tasmania is that it should be probably a government business enterprise. It should be effectively underwritten by the government. No different than Aurora is, or Spirit of Tasmania is, or Taswater is, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Is our own AFL team should be underwritten.
Right.
Now, it actually should be underwritten by the AFL, but you'll find we won't get it if it has to be underwritten by the AFL. So if it doesn't cost the AFL any money, we're a good chance.
Yeah.
So that's where, in the short term, the government has to step up. And it won't be a massive cost. Well, it needs to be owned and operated by Tasmanians, so not the AFL.
No,
It can't
that's
be
where
run
I was
by the
going-
AFL.
That's where I was going with it.
Yeah, it can't be. What the model that they've got at GWS and Gold Coast won't work in Tasmania,
No,
and actually
Okay.
because one, the AFL won't spend the money in Tasmania,
right.
and two, they don't need to,
No,
because we'll generate more money than they will.
than what they were.
Yeah, and I think that the Gold Coast could win, 3 premierships in a row, and they still won't make any money. And I think GWS could win 10 premierships in a row, and they still won't make any money.
But
They'll still be propped up
but
by
the
the
AFL will
AFL.
still
Yeah,
throw
they'll
money.
still
at
throw
it.
money.
Yeah, and look, the Sydney Swan again. Sydney Swans have been, the Sydney Swans operate in profit, but not much.
Yep.
They're, if they just make $400,000-500,000 a year, which is better than losing money. But if they don't win, they won't make any money,
yeah.
and then they'll be propped up by the AFL.
Yeah.
Right. So Sydney Swans have been winning for a long time.
Yep.
Right. And Brisbane the same. Brisbane weren't winning; they're losing money. Now they're winning; they're making money. Right.
Yeah.
So it's all about winning and losing, but Tasmania would be no different.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Sounds
I mean, you learn. That's what I mean. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because I don't know. It just goes on and on and on, and people keep talking about it. But you've got to understand the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, Tasmania.
And unless
Tasmania can make it work. There's no
unless
doubt
we're
about
talking to someone like yourself.
Exactly.
I just don't think the general people actually get this. You put me straight with a few things, but just talking to people,
Yeah.
why don't the AFL give us more money? Why? I'm talking about for clubs and for, football in general, but
They can't.
They can't.
They won't make any difference.
they won't make
right?
no.
So
See,
in the end, so the difference is that the stimulator of the growth of the game will be a national team.
It'll be a national team.
Yeah.